Greetings and welcome to the Animal Wellness Podcast, the official podcast of Animal Wellness Action. Hi, I'm your host, Joseph Grove. On this show, we talk about animals and the people who care about them and have the ability to improve their lives by influencing culture and supporting pro-animal laws and regulations. To stay up to date with all of our news and information, subscribe to this podcast, receive our free newsletters and more, visit animalwellnessaction.org. We're talking again today about the coronavirus, which makes us hardly unique. Everyone is talking about coronavirus. I'm getting emails from people I didn't even realize I had given my email address to, like car washes. Wayne, it's ridiculous. It's like, we want our car wash customers to know that you won't catch the coronavirus as you ride through your car in the car wash. Well, okay. Good to know. But there are a lot of serious things, of course, relating to the coronavirus that need to be discussed. And one of our recent shows, we talked about how this zoonotic disease, that is a disease that crosses the generally reliable membrane between animals and humans when it comes to the transmission of diseases, was crossed at a wet market in Wuhan, China. And we had a lot of very fascinating information to be discussed about the coronavirus relative to that there. And Wayne, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's the case that China has now shut down, at least temporarily, maybe permanently, all of these live animal markets. Is that correct?
Yes, it has. In terms of the official response, whether or not that is followed on the ground is a different matter. But the estimate is 20,000 live animal markets or wet markets where domesticated animals and wild animals are sold, because some small percentage of people in China have an appetite for a wide range of species.
Right, exactly. And they prefer them not only, or indulge in them not only because of the taste, but also, I think we talked about a lot of mythical properties or superstitious properties, cultural myths regarding whether eating a certain animal will make a man more virile or inure to greater health. And correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yes, I think that there is some of that going on as well. And of course, among the people who do this, just a total inattention to animal suffering, and inattention to the defense of biodiversity, and frankly, a complete ignorance about the threats to them as individuals and to society as a whole. And as we discussed in our prior podcast on this, Joe, this is remarkable. I mean, to think of a small little transaction at an open air, squalid, overcrowded, wet market in one city in China, unleashing this global pandemic. The circumstance in the United States, which appears to be in the early stages of grappling with this pandemic, it could be the most significant thing that's happened to the United States since World War II. And, I don't want to say I told you so, on behalf of the animal welfare community, but we have been warning about these wet markets because of the threat of zoonotic diseases being spawned there and jumping the species barrier and infecting a human, and then that virus then crossing the globe. And, we said it after the SARS outbreak in 2002 and 2003, which also began at a wet market in a city in China. And here we are again. And of course, wet markets occur not just in China, but they occur in Vietnam, which has also pledged to close down those wet markets. And we have some in the United States as well. But there's been very little discussion about it. The animal welfare community is trying to inject this into the discussion, but it seems to be lost as we talk, about containment, which is very understandable, because now we want to arrest the spread of this virus. But it's a serious issue, and I think we have a duty as animal welfare advocates to talk about the origins of this so we don't replicate it. And that's why I'm glad we're devoting this conversation today to the effects of the coronavirus on animals.
Yeah, it really, I think, Wayne, was a matter of time. And I think this really foreshadows, this coronavirus episode, what may be to come. I was reading a fascinating article, I think it was from the New York Times or maybe even Nat Geo, on how so much of our deforestation efforts in certain parts of the globe contribute to the growth of the mosquito population. And of course, the mosquito is the most deadly animal on Earth to mankind. It kills about 800,000 people a year through the transmission of malaria and other diseases. As we chop down trees, we create more wet areas where mosquitoes breed. It's interesting to me, too, that we think of viruses often in the context of producing cold-like symptoms. Well, it turns out to be merely coincidental that the viruses that are transmitted affect us this way, of course, because when we sneeze, cough, they put body fluids out there as a byproduct of the virus that propitiates the contagious aspect of it, and it facilitates it. But there are many viruses that have neurological effects that do far more sinister things to people than merely give them pneumonia. And all of these things, be they coming through the mosquito population, whether we are coming in contact with them by penetrating deeper into the habitats where these animals normally reside and have heretofore been confined to, or whether it's through a wet market, our constant infiltration into the world of the animal and the commingling in unhealthful ways for them results in unhealthful results for us. So it's really fascinating and scary at the same time.
Well, you're right, and one of the slogans of Animal Wellness Action and our sister organization, Animal Wellness Foundation, is that helping animals helps us all. That when we're good to animals, we have good outcomes for them and for us. The converse is true. When we do terrible things to animals, there are often bad consequences for society. So, as you noted, 60+% of diseases that afflict people started in animals. You think of the bushmeat trade in Africa as the trigger for the AIDS pandemic in the world that started in the 1980s. More recently, the Ebola virus and that threat of a pandemic. It never became a pandemic, fortunately, but had an incredible rate of death for people who contracted it. And so many other things. Prairie dogs were sold that spawned monkeypox. Mosquitoes and all of the pathogens that are spread by those animals. This is not some academic concern. This is a very practical concern. And we disregard these fundamental biological transfers and transmissions at our peril. And to just talk about symptoms and to talk about containment, really invites a recurrence of this problem. And that's why we hope that as we talk about containment and we talk about all of the really important things that we need to do to stem the spread of this virus, we also talk about not letting it recur in some other form.
It's not science fiction. This is science fact, and we're in for more. We're in for more of it if we don't learn. And I'm somewhat pessimistic, I must say, in our ability to learn a lot from this particular lesson. I'm glad you mentioned the foundation, Animal Wellness Foundation. We have the president of that foundation with us on this podcast, Dr. Annie Harbalis. She is going to be talking with us in a few minutes about pets and coronavirus, some very interesting things happening there we want our listeners to be made aware of. But first, I want to go to Marty Irby. Marty has been doing a great deal of work lobbying on the Horse Racing Integrity Act. Churchill Downs, in my backyard, recently announced that they were postponing the Derby until September. Marty, tell us what this delay owing to the coronavirus means to horse racing, if anything, in the big picture, and what do we need to know regarding the progress of the Horse Racing Integrity Act?
Yes, thank you, Joe. I know since the Derby is in your backyard, I'm sure there will be some economic changes in the area, and they did postpone the Derby until September 5th. But what's interesting is that, as usual, the horse racing industry lags behind everyone else. Every other major sport in the country had been canceled, and then it was about a week or maybe more before the Derby was even postponed. And still today, as we sit here, there are tracks across the country that are running horses. They may not have fans in the stands, but honestly, fans weren't there that much to begin with. So they're putting jockeys, trainers, grooms, valets, so many people at risk. Right now, horses are running this week at Sam Houston in Texas, at Oaklawn Park in Arkansas, Tampa Bay Downs, and on Saturday, the Churchill Downs owned fairgrounds in New Orleans, Louisiana, will be running and hosting the Louisiana Derby. So it seems to me that this was very much a self-serving decision by Churchill Downs for the rest of the world to be able to see that the Derby was postponed, and they didn't really do anything else. All these other tracks are operating, they're running horses, putting people at risk, putting the horses' lives at risk because they're continuing to drug horses as these races go on. And so we really want to see the Horse Racing Integrity Act passed, and we've been calling on Congress to do so, and we think that these races and racetracks should not run these horses until the legislation has been signed into law where this can be taken care of, this can be cleaned up. There's so many health and safety factors related to this. But just know that despite all of the other shutdowns in the world, the one thing that's still running and operating is American horse racing. And even in Tennessee, where the big lick sore horses are shown, those people have even canceled the horse shows. And that says a lot if they've done it and horse racing hasn't. So I'm really disappointed in the horse racing industry and really disappointed in Churchill Downs, but I'm not surprised one bit considering 29 horse racing individuals were indicted last week as well. We hope that things change, and we're going to continue pushing on and working to effectuate that change across the country in American horse racing.
There was some good news. If you're from Louisville or Kentucky or follow thoroughbred racing at all, you know the name Bob Baffert. He recently came out in support of the Horse Racing Integrity Act.
He did. We were really thrilled to have Bob Baffert on board last week. As I said, 29 individuals were indicted, 2 of the other top trainers in the racing industry, and Baffert is well known across the country, probably the most well-known figure in the sport, silver-haired guy, trained the 2 Triple Crown winners that have won in the past 37 years. And I know many of our colleagues and friends in the Coalition for Horse Racing Integrity had been working on him for quite some time. So that was a big gain for us. It really opened the door for pretty much any other trainer out there to support the bill and not face much backlash within the industry since he's the creme de la creme. So we really are thrilled to see that. I do think we're going to see more trainers and other jockeys come on board relatively quickly, and we're going to get some more momentum going on that bill as soon as the coronavirus lets us get our head above water.
Thank you for that update, Marty. I want to transition now over to Dr. Annie Harvallis, Doctor of Veterinary Medicine. She's the president of Animal Wellness Foundation and the secretary for Animal Wellness Action, the producer of this podcast. She resides in LA and owns and operates the Animal Wellness Center there. Annie, we're sure glad you are with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
One of the most heartbreaking stories I've read relating to the outbreak of this coronavirus in China, the thousands upon thousands of pets who have been left to starve to death, to dehydrate, have been abandoned in that area. What do you know about that? And do you see a risk of pets being abandoned if the coronavirus gets China-like out of hand over here?
It's definitely a concern. It's something that we have to be worried about. When it comes to a time when people have to make decisions about what's best for their family, sometimes they forget that their pets are also members of the family. And we've already been seeing here in Los Angeles people coming in who aren't able to care for their pets anymore. We did have somebody relinquish a pet because they lost their job and they just couldn't handle it anymore. But the biggest fear, I think, is, at least in what I'm sensing here in the U.S., is that people are going to have trouble taking care of their pets because of issues with the economy, more than problems with the virus. What I heard from people who were, living through the COVID outbreak in China was that people were afraid of their pets. They were very fearful that they could get the disease from their animals, or that their animal was going to go out and infect more of their family members or their loved ones. And so they, in some cases, were actually euthanizing them just because they were too afraid that they were getting it. And it's because I think a lot of that is, some of it may be cultural, but it's also that it was very new then. And, one of the things that people knew was that it had come from these meat markets, so they were afraid that it was zoonotic enough that people could get it from their pets. But we have a lot more information now. A lot more people have been infected. There have been a lot more pets around. And we know now that we can't get it from the pets, or at least everything we've shown so far is pointing to the fact that people can't get it from their pets.
I want to make that clear, Andy, because that's an important point, because my little Chihuahua from hell is right by my right foot, and she is nervous that I might suspect her of being able to bring in the coronavirus to the home. So can I tell Apple that she is safe with me and that she is not going to make me sick, or she's not going to be made sick?
Yes, I think you can tell Apple she's going to be okay.
You hear that, Apple? You're okay.
Yes.
You're okay, honey.
So here's something that I just learned that the AVMA released. IDEXX is one of our big laboratory service partners. And March 13th, they announced that they had actually developed a test to evaluate COVID-19 in dogs and cats. And they evaluated thousands of dog and cat specimens from potentially exposed animals. And they got no positive results. So we did have that one positive result that's been in the news a lot in Hong Kong. It was a dog that tested weak positive, and it continued to test weak positive. But there's absolutely no indication that that dog can spread it to other dogs or other people. And that was one case out of hundreds of thousands of people who have been exposed and have pets.
Talk about what's a weak positive. Do you know enough about that to explain it to our listeners what that means, a weak positive?
Well, just that when you do the test, I'm not 100% sure what kind of tests that they're running, but a lot of times you're looking for actual particles. Sometimes you're looking for virus particles. Sometimes you're looking at the immune system's response to the virus. So when you have a weak positive, it usually means that there's a very, very small amount present. You're not necessarily enough to be worried about. In other diseases that I do know about, when we get a weak positive, we usually just retest it and be a little cautious. But when you have a strong positive, you're pretty much convinced that it's an accurate test result. Sometimes with weak positives, they can be false positives.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Right. So, and the reason that dogs and cats don't seem to get this is that they have, am I correct, natural immunities to this, that there is some characteristic about their cell DNA that does not enable the virus to penetrate those cells and take up residence there, whereas human cells do not have that defense. Is that an accurate scientific representation of the machinery going on here?
That's perfect. That's exactly the thought process. Because when you can have many zoonotic diseases that could be passed from one species to another, but it doesn't mean that it can pass to all species. So even though this may have come from an animal that was sold at a meat market, that doesn't mean that all animals can get it. It just means that we had that one transmission from a mutation. I will say this, we are saying that it is a good idea if people test positive for COVID-19, or if they're concerned that they have the disease. It is better not to, kiss and cuddle on your dog just to be safe, Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of that has to do with the potential risk of the dog being a fomite, which means if virus particles get on your dog and then someone else immediately kisses on the dog or something, maybe there's some particles that are on the fur.
I got you. Well, it's just so a dog in that case would be just like a banister or a piece of furniture.
Exactly.
The residue could be on there. So
could be a hairbrush or a seat cushion, like anything. Right. Anything can do that. So that's not particular to dogs or cats, but we are recommending as veterinarians that if you have the disease, have someone else care for your pet for a while.
Okay. That's interesting.
while you're in quarantine. Yeah, have someone else walk your dog, feed your dog.
That's interesting because that gets almost into, another part of the reason why animals may be imperiled by the coronavirus, and that is animals being forfeited by owners because they can't care for them. So why would that be important? For example, if let's take my dog Apple, right? If I have coronavirus and if Apple never goes out to, she uses the potty pads indoors, would it still be advisable that I let someone else feed her or take care of her, even if she's not around other people? Or is it only dogs who might be on a walk or might be with other dogs and therefore could get this back in the so-called seat cushion way, let's call it that, to other folks?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, I think so. And I also think it's just because with viruses, and especially this new virus, we don't know everything about it. So we're just trying to be safe. That's why they're making that recommendation at the AVMA. It's just to be safe. But I have a tiny little Yorkie. She would be very happy to just hang out with me and not go outside or be around anyone else. If I got sick, I probably would keep her with me.
Yeah, right.
because the benefits of having her with me, both for her and myself, far outweigh the risk. But as a professional and the professional organization, they're recommending if you're sick, have someone else care for your pet for you.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that may worry you also with your animal advocacy, that you will suddenly see people overreacting to that suggestion and saying, I may have coronavirus, here, take my pet. Okay.
No, we don't want that, because the idea is that it's temporary. A lot of times people are only quarantined for 2 to 4 weeks. It should not make people relinquish their pets. It's not worth it. And they're also probably concerned that, sometimes people have to get hospitalized and then what's going to happen to the pets? Like, I know in China they were having trouble where people were getting so sick, they were getting hospitalized and nobody knew that they had a dog or a cat at home. And the dog and cat at home, they were going a week, 2 weeks without any food or anything. So
I think
it's good for...
Yeah, I think that was the genesis of the story I was reading about, all of the thousands of pets starving to death or dehydrating, in China, is that so many people had either left or were, to your point, hospitalized. And
so there's several reasons why it's a good idea to, let someone know you have a pet, see if somebody else can help take care of them while you're ill and while you're recovering.
All right, good. Well, I want to go to one other question, and then I'll turn it over to Wayne and Marty, because people are getting laid off, right? Bartenders, wait staff, lots of folks, in the tip-based economy are going to be hurting financially. What resources are available for these people to help take care of their pets while they try and keep food on the table for themselves?
There are a lot of resources available, and the best place for people to find those resources is to contact their veterinarian. Veterinarians are highly compassionate people in general, and they are very concerned about making sure that people keep their pets and people are able to pay for things. So there are a lot of funds out there to help people with veterinary care. There are food banks out there. They're just very localized. So the best thing to do is to contact your veterinarian. With Animal Wellness Foundation, for the past 10 years here in Los Angeles, we've been helping people who are low income, who need help with their veterinary expenses. Before that, I did work at the ASPCA in New York City. And one thing that I've found repeatedly is that people that don't have the financial resources that they need to take care of their pet sometimes wait too long to seek care. And that's the most important message that I have today for people. You don't want to wait. If your dog is sick, call the vet. If your dog is having diarrhea, call. Don't wait until it gets to a point where they're so dehydrated or, vomiting so much or have a foreign body that's been in their intestines too long. Like a lot of diseases, if you treat it early, it can be kind of cheap, for lack of a better way to say it. If you come in right when your dog starts having diarrhea, we can treat it with pills and be done, and it's easy. But if you wait until they're extremely dehydrated, and sometimes people wait until they're on the verge of death, and you bring them in, that's a bill that's going to be a couple $1,000s. If a cat goes 2 days sometimes, but more likely like 2 or 3 days without eating, their liver starts shutting down and they get extremely sick. It's better to take care of it early, like seek help fast, quickly, don't wait.
So if you're listening to
Because
this
it'll get worse.
podcast, right, and you've lost your income because of coronavirus, your message is call your veterinarian, explain the situation. Don't be ashamed, right? Don't be afraid to call the veterinarian and say, hey, this virus is costing me my income, but my cat is showing or my dog is showing these symptoms. What can be done, to help me out here? Are most vets working right now? Is there any sort of what do you know about that across the country?
Veterinarians, and I actually did some research on this, on what happened in China, what happened in Italy. Even when they have lockdowns, veterinarians are considered essential employees.
Good to know.
So veterinarians are going to stay open. A lot of them are going back to just emergency care. We're not doing a lot of elective procedures, but vets are going to stay open, and they're going to be there for you. What we're doing at our clinic, at our hospital, and what a lot of hospitals pretty much around the country are doing is, I'm calling it a drive-through service. Instead of people getting out of the car, they're just driving up to our hospital, calling when they're there. We're getting a history, getting all the information on the phone, and then somebody comes out, gets the pet, brings the pet inside, and the owner never leaves their car. It's great because without that person-to-person contact, we're really minimizing the chance of, COVID infection. But we're also getting all the pets taken care of. And I think that's another thing that's important, because there are going to be some people out there that aren't going to take their pets to the vet because they're too concerned about contracting something at the vet office. So it's good to know that veterinarians are taking precautions. And also, veterinarians, more than most other businesses, know how to deal with contagious disease. A lot better than your average doctor, to be honest, your average human doctor. So you have to trust your veterinarian.
Yeah, this is Wayne, Dr. Annie and Joe, and that's all great stuff, Dr. Annie. Thank you for sharing that. I think you're correct that vets are so caring, and it's an amazing network. 80,000 veterinarians in the United States, but I will tell you that it's a lot of burden on them. And Dr. Annie will be the first to tell you that most of them are small business owners, and they are very stressed. It's one of the most intense jobs you can have. I mean, the suicide rates for veterinarians are among the highest of any occupation in the country, and they're burdened. And for them to deal with this chronic problem of people not having enough resources or feeling they don't have enough resources to feed their animals, to give them medical services, other things such as vaccination, spay, neuter, that's precisely why Dr. Annie started the Animal Wellness Foundation more than a decade ago. Because there are, even in the best of circumstances, there are tens of millions of people who are at or below the poverty line. And I remember going down to Katrina to Louisiana after the Katrina hurricane hit. Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast in 2005, and there were so many people from lower income areas who were desperate to help their animals. But most of their animals at that time, hadn't been to a veterinarian before, not because those folks didn't want to give them medical care, but because they didn't have access or they didn't have means. There might have been lower spay and neuter rates because there might not have been enough programs to support that, but those folks wanted their animals sterilized as well. And this is why I think putting it on the vets alone would be impossible. I'm sure Dr. Annie would agree, going to your local humane organizations, animal care organizations, and asking for assistance. And this is, again, the raison d'etre for the Animal Wellness Foundation. And the Animal Wellness Foundation is going to be expanding its programs during this time to try to attend to people's needs for their animals, whether it's food or medical services. And this, to me, is one of the biggest companion animal issues in the United States. Puppy mills are a big problem. Dog fighting is a big problem. But when you think about 40 million people at or below the poverty line in a normal circumstance without a contagion, that is if 2/3 of those households have pets, that means that you're talking 25 or 30 million animals there where people often don't have the means to provide all the care that they would otherwise want. And that's where humane organizations pick up the slack, because government typically is not there to handle this circumstance. And this is where philanthropy and volunteers and animal organizations come in. And that's what the Animal Wellness Foundation is trying to do. But my God, it's a big country. We've got 330 million people, and this is a lot of animals in need. So this has got to be a big focus for the animal welfare movement broadly, not just the Animal Wellness Foundation, but for so many other organizations to help with this problem.
So Wayne, if we're putting together a checklist from this interview, we would have Dr. Annie's point. Don't hesitate to call your vet if, owing to, for example, your circumstances related to the virus, or maybe in any other circumstance, you can't afford to take care of your pet, and let the veterinarian talk to you about options there. But then if it comes to just needing support generally for food, to take care of the animal otherwise, you would make sure that you're in touch with the local humane society or other philanthropic organization.
I would. I mean, a lot of them have pet pantries. They have food that people donate, and they can be a source for that. And they may have relationships with veterinarians who may be able to provide some medical services. I mean, I think the Animal Wellness Foundation is, at the top of the list in terms of having this as a fundamental purpose of the charitable organization. A lot of other humane organizations may be focused on, fostering, or they may be focused on spay and neuter, or they may be focused on adoption. But Animal Wellness Foundation, its primary mission in terms of its companion animal advocacy is to provide more in the way of medical services to animals who otherwise can't get it because their custodians, their caretakers don't have access, or they don't have the resources to do it.
Dr. Annie, tell us a little bit more about Animal Wellness Foundation. How broad is its scope? What's its mission? You're the president of it. Give us the inside scoop on what that organization is.
So I founded Animal Wellness Foundation over a decade ago, mostly because I could see how terrible it is for animals, their owners, and the veterinarians who serve them when people just don't have the means to afford the veterinary care that they need. And there has to be something that the veterinary community can do about this. And so that's why I started Animal Wellness Foundation, with the idea that our practice of veterinary medicine, all the clients, we basically have become a community. And a lot of the clients who can afford to donate money, they will donate money to us to help the people who don't have funding. So we've gotten to a point where we've really been working like crazy here in Los Angeles. My vision is to have this be a model for what veterinary practices can do all over the country. So our mission is to help people who can't afford on a national scale veterinary care for their animals by basically revolutionizing the veterinary industry.
And I think, Joe, it's Wayne again. I just want to amplify a couple of Dr. Annie's points there that, vets care, but they're running a business. And it's difficult to run that business and to get net revenues for the center that allow, the vet and the multiple vets, maybe if it's a larger clinic, and the techs and others to get an income. And if you're, dealing with giving free services left and right, I mean, you can't run a business. I mean, you have to have paying customers if you're any kind of business. So the foundation is kind of an adjunct to the vet hospital that can take care of some of those costs. So the vet hospital actually gets some revenues from the medical procedures and medical work that's done, so it can continue to operate and continue to help animals who are owned by paying clients or non-paying clients. And that's the beauty, I think, of this kind of private business, private charity relationship. And I think that's what we want to expand at the Animal Wellness Foundation. I mean, Annie said it's Los Angeles, a big city. Yeah, it's the second biggest city in the United States. It's huge. It's got millions of people. You're talking about 3,000 counties in the United States, 330 million. We need to dramatically expand this. This is like before there were local SPCAs and humane societies in counties, in the late 1800s, there were a few that were doing it, the MSPCA and the ASPCA and a few others, but most communities and most counties had no humane organization. That's what it's like at this point for us when it comes to vet hospitals having a related foundation that can help offset these medical costs, which is just like human medicine. The costs are increasing. There's no safety net now for families. Pet health insurance is only 1 or 2% of people with pets have pet health insurance. This is a huge issue in our field, and we need a much bigger philanthropic commitment to this kind of work. And hitching it to veterinary hospitals makes sense because they've got the technical expertise, they've got the equipment, they've got the commitment. They just don't have the resources to do it.
One thing that I wanted to say is I think that this is the beginning, what we're seeing here with this COVID-19. I think that we're in it for the long haul. And I also have had a couple clients who say they lost their jobs because of the disease, and they're not going to be able to pay for the vet care that they need. But it's just the beginning. It's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. And so now is the time for us to expand what we're doing here, because the entire United States of America is going to be in trouble in terms of the economy and what people are going to be able to do for their pets. And so, this is the time when we have to have a call to action to really help out and step up and be the leaders of this revolution in the veterinary industry.
Joe, yeah, I wanted to add too. Thanks, Annie, so much for such a great show today. But I also wanted to add that I didn't include this earlier. One other very huge disappointment in the city of New York and in the horse industry is that even though they've shut down most of the transportation in Manhattan, horse-drawn carriages are still running and operating around Central Park and around the city. And we're going to be working on that a little further. But that's a little disappointing to see that the mayor and the city council there hasn't done anything about that in the times that we're in. So I just wanted to add that in. And thanks again, Annie, for being here today with us.
Thank you so much for listening to the Animal Wellness Podcast. I've been your host, Joseph Grove. Be sure to visit animalwellnessaction.org to find out about all of our legislative efforts, subscribe to our newsletters, and link up with our social media channels. Want to subscribe to this podcast? Go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Podbean, and we'll be back real soon with another episode of the Animal Wellness Podcast.